Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and the price of the Nintendo Switch 2, whichever way you slice it, it's a lot. But what are you getting for that money? I'm not talking about the controllers and the dock and all the stuff you get in the box, or you get an HDMI cable. Admittedly, you might need that because it's 4K 60. I'm talking about the value when it comes to the performance, because we have a vague idea from looking at things like Mario Kart World and things like that. We can look at that and we can go, that looks nice. But on a consumer level, it's definitely harder to really pin down just what kind of power we're dealing with here. Is there a way that we can analyze something and compare it to something else in order to get a rough idea of what kind of power we're dealing with? Yes, there is. That's why this video exists. Now, I'm not going to be going through a load of numbers in this video. I'm not going to be talking gigahertz and teraflops or anything like that because, well, for one thing, we don't know, and for another, I just find that it's not very accessible, really. You've got to know the entire sort of way that a computer works in order to get a vague understanding of what that means. You can tell someone how spicy a chili is by using the Scoville scale, and it's accurate and it's true. But it's far easier to say this chili is slightly more spicy than a habanero. People just understand better. I ran some tests with, of all things, Cyberpunk 2077, because it's been announced for the Nintendo Switch 2, and it's also available on other consoles. Unfortunately, we didn't actually see masses of footage in the Direct. We saw glimpses, we saw bits, we saw the occasional sort of like chopped up few seconds of footage. But it's enough to be able to draw some sort of comparison. Thankfully, my first thought was the Steam Deck. Is the Switch 2 as powerful as the Steam Deck? Now, some people may be immediately running to the comments and going, obviously yes, or some people may even say, obviously no. Well, guess what? One of you's right. It's the first lot. But admittedly, going into this, we didn't know. I'd never seen Cyberpunk running on the Steam Deck, and now I have, and it's an experience, all right. I mean, in all seriousness, it's fine. It's a portable device, it's amazing that it runs at all, that kind of thing. But it has to be said, some sacrifices have been made. Some sacrifices that they did not have to make with the Switch 2 version. I've got a side-by-side here so you can get a better idea. And if it's not immediately obvious to you, I mean, look closer, I suppose. Admittedly, some people may be watching this on a phone, which is going to make things a lot harder. But let me just freeze frame here, for example. I think this is a really good indicator to show the difference between the two systems. Just look at the dirt, look at the detail in the background as well. There is so much more here, so much clearer on the Switch 2. And this isn't a capture thing or anything like that. This is just because the Steam Deck is running at a way sub 1080p with upscaling and all that sort of stuff. Admittedly, the original was captured at 1080p 60, but trust me, capturing it at 4K wasn't going to make it look any better. There we go. That was easy, wasn't it? It's more powerful than a Steam Deck. I also have another portable PC, a little thing called the One X Player X1, which I did a video about. And I thought, well, that'll be interesting as well, have a comparison, because, the Steam Deck, it's running Linux, it's got that compatibility layer with Proton and stuff like that. Let's see what it's like on a more powerful system. And the One X Player X1 is more powerful. It's the 8840U AMD Ryzen. Wrong order. It's the AMD Ryzen 8840U model, and it's reasonably powerful. It is reasonably powerful, particularly for a portable device. I wanted to get the settings as high as I could without frame generation, and I was aiming for about 40 frames a second, which is what the Switch 2 is aiming for as well, at least in docked mode. And I've got to say, the Switch 2 is winning out again. I mean, the Steam Deck, I couldn't even really get to 40 frames a second consistently at all. Here, it seems to be much more consistent, but even then, later on in the game, I ran into some serious, frame drops. I mean, I say serious, down to the 30s and sometimes 25 and something like that. And I know that the Switch 2 can handle the game properly because I've seen Xeon play Dogtown. And Dogtown is dog something on Steam Deck at the very least. But the One X player is running on Windows, which is pretty intensive, at least compared to the Switch 2's operating system, which could probably run on a button. So I turned to our colleagues at Digital Foundry, and they very kindly agreed to let me use some of their footage from their comparison between the PS4 and PS4 Pro versions of Cyberpunk 2077. And this is where things get even more interesting. Just because of the nature of the footage, we don't have the same shots per se, but suffice it to say, I mean, the Switch 2 is easily looking noticeably more powerful, at least in Cyberpunk 2077, than the PS4. The PS4 is softer, the frame rate is way less consistent, but what about the Pro? Is it more powerful than even a PS4 Pro? The answer is possibly. The problem with comparisons like this is it's never going to be exactly one-to-one, particularly when you don't have the game yet. You know, Cyberpunk on PS4 and Pro, that's an older build we're looking at here. You know, sort of there have been performance improvements and things like that all over the years. But the fact that we're even considering that the Switch 2 might be more powerful than a PS4 Pro? That's pretty damn exciting. And some people will say, well, why would I spend that much money when it's not even as powerful as a PS5 or something like that? And to that I say, do you complain that your laptop isn't as powerful as your massive gaming PC? I hope not. The Switch 2, not pictured, is a portable device. You can hold it in your hand, you can carry it around. It has a screen, a 120Hz 1080p screen, and a battery. You've got to pay for those things. The PS5 and every other standard console that just plugs into a TV, you don't get those. You need to have a TV, which admittedly, you probably already do. You can also use a monitor. But you can't take your PS5 out of the house and play it on the bus. And I'm well aware the Portal exists, but the Portal is like half the price of a Switch 2, roughly. And then you also need a PS5. And to complicate matters further, Cyberpunk 2077 is a launch game on the Switch 2. Games are always better later down the line as people become more familiar with the architecture. They understand more. They can squeeze more out of every little bit of the console. So this is arguably as bad as a AAA port is ever going to get. And that's another thing. This is a port. The game was never designed with the Switch 2 in mind. How could it? It wasn't even a glint in Miyamoto's eye. Miyamoto probably didn't have too much to do with the Switch 2, but it's a metaphor. The fact that they can take an existing game and just shove it onto this system and it looks this good? That's exciting. If you're not excited, you're not looking closely enough. What's more, Nintendo will always get more out of their system because they flipping made it. They understand it inside and out. They know the little corners where you can find more graphics. Just look at Mario Kart World, an open world racer. Look at how glorious it is with all the animations, the shadows, all the effects and everything. You can't deny it's a pretty game, and this is a launch game from Nintendo. They only ever get better. Pokemon excluded, but that's not Nintendo developed. There's in fact an excellent example of this on the Switch 1, and even then it wasn't that long after launch, all things considered, only a couple of years. Luigi's Mansion 3. Luigi's Mansion 3 honestly looks like it could be a Switch 2 game already. Yeah, it's not 4K, yeah, it's only running at 30 frames a second, but my god, this is an impressive game for the Switch 1. Imagine what next-level games could do with a Luigi's Mansion 4! Nvidia, the creators of presumably the biggest chip in the Switch 2, have made a blog post saying that it's 10 times more powerful than the Switch 1 and all this sort of thing. I don't actually find that useful to quantify, to be brutally honest, because what is 10 times more power in a games console? It's kind of meaningless in a way. I mean, you can get a vague idea, and I understand why they use numbers like that, but I don't actually think it's that useful, realistically. And all of this is on a device that costs, pre-tariffs, $450. Now, don't get me wrong, $450, as I said at the start of the video, it's a lot of money whichever way you slice it, you know? If you were looking to buy a house and you found a house in the neighborhood and it was, you know, just as good as all the others, or maybe even better, and it was half the price of all the others, you know, it's still hundreds of thousands of pounds or hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's still a lot of money. Something can be a bargain and still cost a lot of money. They're not mutually exclusive. I've seen a lot of people say that the accessories are expensive as well, and absolutely, yeah. The camera, $50, 50 quid, you know, that's a lot of money just for a camera, I'm not gonna lie, but wouldn't you prefer it to be this way round than they bundled it in and charged you 50 when you weren't even gonna use it? Think about it. At the end of the day, if you don't need the camera, you don't need the camera. You don't have to pay for the camera. The 1X player that I used as an example earlier, that is a machine that costs, I mean, admit it, okay, it's much, much bigger and it's a Windows machine. It's not an apples to apples example, but that still costs over $1,000. $1,000. The Switch 2 is half the price. Less than half the price. And there are other handheld PCs out there, absolutely. There's plenty of competition now, which the Switch 1 didn't have. But you point me to a single one of those that is offering this much power as much as the Switch 2 at this price point that is exactly as thin as the original Nintendo Switch with a 120Hz screen, and so help me, I will purchase it. I don't have one yet, and at the end of the day, a console is realistically only a foundation on which the games are built, and the games are what's important. But what a foundation. I am so excited by the power of this thing. The potential, the opportunities, the games we're gonna be able to play. It's gonna be incredible. Now, if they could make the games cheaper, that would be even better. But what do you think? Do you think it's too expensive? Do you think it should be able to do 1700 teraflops in 4 seconds? If you know what that means, let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you consider the power of subscribing to this channel? Because, oh my god, that would make you so powerful. And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye. It's definitely focusing on Keanu's face. Thankfully, it seems to prioritize mine. This sandwich tastes 10 times better than this sandwich. That's a rubbish example, don't use that.